All of the movie geeks are here to give our thoughts on the legacy, the contribution of Robin Williams, what he meant to film in particular. And I am Jamie, and the rest of the gang here. Dean, hey Dean, hang on, I got you.
Hey, how are you?
Aaron, hey man.
Howdy, folks.
And Jerry, hey buddy.
Hey, what's going on? So here we are once again.
Yeah. Well, I think what's particularly shocking about Robin Williams is just the unique, the one of a kind of manic energy he had. We all equated it with him being completely unbridled and full of life. So that's particularly why this is a shocking death.
Yeah, definitely.
Sort of.
I have to tell you my experience because I just had it, like 2 hours ago. I'm sitting down in Boston where, of course, Robin Williams filmed his Oscar-winning role, in Good Will Hunting, and I was just hanging out just in the area where, on the poster for Good Will Hunting, that bench that he and Matt Damon are at. I was just hanging out in that area by the river here. But at any rate, I was just hanging out in a park, and Jason Miller, who I'm staying up here with, comes up to me while I'm on the phone with somebody, and he says, Robin Williams just died of suicide. And yeah, the first thing that you think of is definitely totally shocking, of course, because of his comedic nature, but also I think he didn't keep it secret that he was battling addictions and also depression. That was very clear too. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily a thing of a surprise in some ways.
Right. Yeah, so, I have to agree. The depression thing is he was an open. I would say, I wouldn't say his whole career, but he was very open about it, it seemed like the last 10, 15 years. And let's be honest, comedy comes from a very dark place. And to be that funny, that manic, and let's be very just that insane and spontaneous, that comes from a dark place. That doesn't come from puppies and ice cream. I'm sorry. That comes from a very dark place.
He was as honest in his comedy about the drug addiction and the depression and all of that kind of stuff as somebody like Richard Pryor was, even though their approach to expressing that was different. And actually, Robin Williams got his one of his first big breaks from Richard Pryor, because he was cast on Richard Pryor's short-lived TV show, I know, before Mork and Mindy came along, or Happy Days came along. Aaron, what do you think of when you think Robin Williams?
When I think of Robin Williams, and like all of us, I'm a kid of the '80s, and so he's one of those perennials on HBO, not just in the movies, but I remember his stand-up on HBO, Live at the Met, and then there was the one that he did in San Francisco. That is just one of those remarkable things, tour de force performances. He doesn't come up for air in that performance, and you kind of wish one hopes it probably won't happen, but one hopes HBO would put these at least put these on demand. They have the ability to put this stuff now on demand.
I bet that'll happen. I can see that happening.
Yeah, I see it.
But I doubt it. They don't go into their archives. They really don't, except for those young comedian specials. But the point being, Robin Williams was just such, that whole '80s comedy was, that peak of '80s comedy was of boomer comedy was just kind of had this manic energy. It was the first generation of guys who were, they were post-vaudevillians. They liked the old school, but they were doing something different. Post-vaudevillians.
Comedy. Yeah, in his comedy, for me, and I think for a lot of people, he was unstoppable. I think it's very clear that he was somebody who was always on I believe, and I mean, like that's that comedy term where you're always doing the funny, and and actually, out of all of the comedians that I can think of, he was actually sort of the one that was ratcheted up the highest. I always felt like he was basically sort of jumping out of his skin. Now, that some of that was, especially early on, was due to some of his drug addiction, which I believe, some of his. I think his main drug of choice was cocaine, and so I think that contributed to that feeling, and certainly, sometimes early in his career, or sometimes in his performances in movies, it was difficult to get that manic comedy tendency out of his performances, and eliminated from his performances, and sometimes it took you out of the character because it became too Robin Williams-y, So I think.
Well, here's my thought on that. I think that in his comedy, and all you have to do is look at like one of his appearances on Johnny Carson, because Johnny Carson loved him. He worked from a very dangerous place, a risky place where he could fall on his face, because you could tell that he was going out there and he was just going to riff on all the elements around him, like with wild abandon, and that was a risky place to be. Now, movies are so different that I don't think that he might have been reined in. He might have felt reined in by a lot of his films, but I think the one where he probably felt the freest, ironically, was Aladdin, to absolutely go off wherever he wanted, and they would follow.
And I think
I think you're absolutely right.
I think we can agree when he gave. There were films that were obviously tailor-made for his improv style. That okay, we're going to let Robin go loose, and Aladdin's a good example. Also, Good Morning Vietnam is another one playing a DJ, and so you can allow him to riff. But when the director had a strong vision, his strongest performances dramatically were usually in the films where the directors weren't afraid to rein him in, be it in Garp, be it Moscow on the Hudson, be it Awakening. And those are films where the directors knew that they knew what his talent was for comedy, but they knew that if they reined him in, they could also get something strong dramatically out of him, and that's a good example. And then his
first film, he
was
a trained actor. He trained at Juilliard, right? As an actor. And so.
I'm sorry, Aaron. Where?
At Juilliard. Christopher Reeve was one of his classmates. That's why they're such good friends.
Let me ask a question. Because we're talking about the dramatic roles. Do you think, in terms of movies, his brilliance really came out more in the dramatic roles than in the comedy?
I don't know. That's hard to say because he was. I think he was probably among comic actors, even though he did his fair share of bad movies, and he would, I'm sure, freely admit that. I think that he was kind of like at the very highest pantheon of comic actors in terms of popularity and range. Because no one was more popular than Robin Williams as a comic actor. I mean, let's face it. But dramatically, my feeling about his dramatic work is, I mean, I thought that he was a great actor in general, but I thought that sometimes in the drama there was an over earnestness that came into play, and I thought the movie that really epitomized how good he can be in drama, without the kind of saccharine quality that something like Patch Adams brought, was Awakenings. And he would be the very last person you'd think to cast in Awakenings, because Oliver Sacks is this very cerebral neurologist. I mean, he's and you're having the wacky guy play him, but there's something so beautifully minimal and about his performance in that movie, and so very sweet. I mean, that's a very sweet movie. That's absolutely one of my favorite performances of his, and favorite movies.
Yeah,
and Williams identified
that's all of him. I mean, that's all of the sides of Robin Williams, and so he got to play a lot, many more facets of himself than most people are allowed to. So to say that maybe his dramatic work shined through more than his comedic, they're all part of him. So I don't know.
Right.
No,
but I just think that you see, I think Garp is such an important part so early out in the gate because a lot of people just wanted him to play Mork constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's why Popeye falters because of that. Because you'll go into it as a little kid, you're going, oh, it's going to be like Mork, and you're watching it. At 8 or 9, I don't know anything about Robert Altman. I don't think Robert Altman really knew what he was doing on that movie either. But you watch something like Garp, and Garp right out of the gate says, this guy can really act. This guy is what Belushi. This is what we thought Belushi would become.
It shows intention. It shows intention. It shows the intent to try something different. It's kind of like the same thing that Steve Martin did with Pennies from Heaven, for instance. He's not just a jerk. It's something different. So
if you look at that
there's a sense of ambition.
Go ahead.
There's a sense of ambition there.
If you look at that period, that 82 period, a lot of those comics at the time were trying to stretch. Steve Martin had Pennies from Heaven, Belushi had Continental Divide, and Robin Williams had Garp. Now, all three of those films really kind of underperformed at the box office. And also, Pennies from Heaven and Continental Divide are kind of underwhelming as movies just on their own merit.
That's a matter of opinion, by the way.
What about the other Robin Williams movies?
Hold on. But Garp is also an underwhelming movie. Well, and Garp is the problem. We can get it. We don't want to get into the problem with Garp, but the thing is, Robin Williams does show that he can maintain a performance very early on. Everyone, and Jamie's right about Awakening being a very strong performance, but I mean, Garp is his second performance, and there's none of that comedy fussiness in Garp.
Absolutely. What's striking about Garp is all the manic, crazy stuff that he normally brought to a performance. All of that stuff was happening around him in Garp.
Right.
So he acted much like
he's acting as a straight man in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
he's acting as a straight man.
Can
I mention some other movies though? Can we?
Yeah, sure.
There's for me that period where he's first coming out, I think is the strongest period for him. Even though he wasn't quite the huge star that he would become later on, but I like both the comedies and the dramas that he came out with pre Good Morning Vietnam. Those things like Mussorgsky's Moscow on the Hudson, where he's, as the Russian immigrant that's experiencing all sides of America for the first time. I think that's an incredibly underrated film, and incredibly insightful, and also a very sweet movie. And it does give him an opportunity to sort of combine the comedy and the drama in an unusual way. But with dramatic performances, I guarantee you nobody's going to be mentioning this movie in a lot of these remembrances. But there was a film in 1986 called Seize the Day, based on the Saul Bellow novel with
that's right,
with Robin Williams playing a very dark role, kind of a Willy Loman-esque salesman. That was, and I haven't seen it in a few years now, but I remember seeing that on PBS and being incredibly affected by his ability. Like that was really the first time that I had ever seen the really truly deeply dramatic Robin Williams without actually any sense of the comedian behind the role.
you're adapting Saul Bellow. That's already right there is an impossible thing to do for film. I've come to the conclusion it's not an easy thing to do. And Robin Williams is the last person, let's be honest, that you'd ever think about would play a Saul Bellow protagonist. I mean, or antagonist, whatever the correct
right
phrase is. So I mean,
you go back to the comedies though in that period too, and you have like Michael Ritchie's The Survivors.
The Survivors.
Yeah, I was the one I was going to mention.
Which is kind of an edgy movie. I mean, that's kind of an edgy movie.
It is. Go back and look at The Survivors now. Go back and look at The Survivors now, and you will find a movie that has more to say about what's going on right today than maybe it did back then. Because it's really it is about paranoia. It's about it's about gun ownership. It's about
very dark comedy.
But strangely enough, actually, The Survivors has maybe my favorite Robin Williams line ever in a movie, which is going to sound. But there's a scene where Jerry Reed is a hitman in the movie, and he tries to take Robin Williams out in the forest, and they try to kill each other, and Jerry Reed tries to take him out by sticking a cigarette in a tree and making it look like that Jerry Reed's hiding behind the tree and smoking a cigarette. And so Robin Williams comes up, tries to bayonet him, and he ends up bayoneting the tree, and he sees the cigarette in the tree and says, "What kind of sick bastard gives cigarettes to trees?" And I thought, and the way he says it though is that manic, ratcheted up, Robin Williams thing. Anyway, that's a great movie, also with Walter Matthau.
Walter Matthau. No, that's the one I wanted to talk about. It's such a, it's a very dark comedy. I mean, what was that, 81 or 82 or a little bit, 83. Maybe a little bit late? 83. That's a dark film. But you're right. It says more about the day.
Let me ask you this, because you mentioned Belushi earlier. Belushi held an important milestone in Robin Williams' life. They were friends, but he was in the hotel room with Belushi the night he died, and that kind of scared him off of drugs the first time, Robin Williams, and he stayed clean for a while. And really his career soared because of it. Do you think he had the career that John Belushi might have had?
Yes.
Yeah, I think believe that.
I think
I know that we said Belushi. Yeah, if John Belushi cleaned up, yeah.
But not just that. We always said on this show, is that Belushi could have been our next Brando. I'm not saying Robin Williams was our Brando, but as far as a comedic superstar, and let's be honest, that's what Robin Williams, one of his legacies will be, is box office gold for a long time as far as comedies go. He had, I do think, the career that Belushi might have eventually had he lived. I do believe that.
Because Belushi was already doing it. I mean, Belushi was
doing it, but Belushi. But he unfortunately, we don't know what would have happened. We just don't know. But I think Robin Williams, because he comes from that generation. Yeah, they're all part of that generation. He's, even though Robin Williams wasn't on SNL, he's part of that generation of that actors and performers from that time in the 70s. So I would say he's probably one of the most successful consistently. I mean, even though the movies were more geared as he got older, more towards kids, not as blatantly as Eddie Murphy, who has become exclusively a children's actor, but Robin Williams definitely was, regardless of the quality of those films, he became a superstar. There's no doubt about that. But I do think Belushi was headed that way had he lived.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not too sure about Belushi. I mean, Belushi had raw talent and had kind of he was kind of the crazy wild man that everyone always talked about, and he didn't know what was going to happen when he was in a room comedically, but he didn't have the discipline or the training that Robin Williams had. So don't know if it would have if he had settled down, if he could have done dramatically what Williams could do. People like to speculate that, but Williams. I mean, Belushi never. In the 7 films of Belushi, you love him in the films, but he doesn't show the range that Robin Williams shows. Belushi doesn't have in what we have of Belushi in the 7 years of Saturday Night Live and of movies. He doesn't have a lot of range at that point yet.
Here's the big difference. Hold on a second. Let me say something. Here's the big difference. The big difference between the Belushi and the Robin Williams, the comparison, is that Belushi was radically, for most of his career, until you saw Continental Divide, for most of his career, Belushi was a lot more dangerous, seeming dangerous, almost mean, and dangerous to the point where it felt like, I'm sure that some of his, he was dangerous behind the scenes of Saturday Night Live. Some people were afraid of him. I don't think that anybody was afraid of Robin Williams.
Well, I don't know about that.
That was his main thing, that he was dangerous. But there was rarely, Robin Williams had warmth. He had kind of a playfulness. He had warmth. He had dramatic. He had sadness. He had pathos. He had other colors that he could play, even in his earliest films. Where Belushi,
I agree.
Belushi did not have Belushi. I don't know if he did, but up until his death, he did not play many colors. Neighbors is the only film where they changed it, and he did show some promise in Neighbors.
What is your impression of something like, because he wanted to really branch out in the early 2000s, and he took on a couple of really dark movies. What is your impression of something like 1 Hour Photo?
For me, Robin Williams. I'll say that the thing is, Robin Williams early on, even at his peak, in that Dead Poets, Fisher King peak, Doubtfire era, he always did this thing in Hook. He always did this thing where he went off and would do these bits in other people's movies, and didn't do a lot of fanfare, didn't get a lot of fanfare. But if you saw those bits, you're like, oh shit, one of those deals. Like, he's really good and he's staying in character. One of my favorite is in Kenneth Branagh's Dead Again.
Yeah.
Two scenes.
Well, he wasn't even credited. He wasn't even credited.
Yeah, and he plays a disgraced psychiatrist turned grocery store owner, and he's terrific, and he's in character. He stays in character. He's funny, but he stays in character. He's funny as the character, and that's a terrific bit. And then to the point, he's very good in Branagh's Hamlet, 5 years later in Oscar. And then in that that 2000 period, that early aughts, obviously I think Williams felt he had to, one of these deals, you get criticized so much, you're like, oh, I guess I have to remind people that I can do this stuff, because he got so hammered for Patch Adams and Bicentennial Man by critics.
And Flubber.
Well, I'm pretty sure though, by the way.
Flubber was obviously the bad film, but Flubber came out literally within weeks of both Good Will Hunting and his great one scene bit in Deconstructing Harry, where he
that's so good,
where he's out of focus, and so he did this odd stuff. So 1 Hour Photo is terrific, but the film from 2000, the performance I love from 2002. I think Jamie, you'll agree, is Insomnia. Once again, like I've been saying, the director knowing what he wants and keeping the actor within the corralling the actor and not letting them go off the reservation. And I remember when I first saw the trailer for Insomnia, and you get that. I think if I remember the trailer correctly, you only get like 1 or 2 shots of Robin Williams where it's revealed he's the villain. And I remember being in the audience and people were like, really? Robin Williams is the villain? And then you see the movie. It's a pretty remarkable performance. In fact, I actually think it's a far more textured and colored performance in Insomnia than in 1 Hour Photo. 1 Hour Photo, he got probably more praise, which I like 1 Hour Photo, but I think Insomnia is the far more rewarding performance.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just film, a better movie and a better story, I think, and like on top. But yeah, I agree with you, but I love him in 1 Hour Photo, and but can I mention some more obscure movies that I'm afraid might get overshadowed by some of the other ones that I adore. He did a movie with a kind of a big cast, John Turturro and a whole bunch of people in the early 90s called Being Human with the director-writer Bill Forsyth.
He did Local Hero, right?
Yeah, Local Hero.
And this was a movie that got raked over the coals quite a bit by critics, and it's a film about a father. Well, it actually takes place in 5 different eras. There's one part that takes place in the Roman era, and one. So there's 5 different eras, and it's a father contemplating his place in sort of the universe with his kids and so forth. And it's really it's a very unusual, hard to describe movie, and I think that it's a film that a lot of people didn't see, and I always felt like it was misunderstood, and was actually quite effective in what it was trying to communicate about family life and our place in time and the universe. I also wanted to mention a great episode of Homicide that he did, Homicide: Life on the Streets, which was one of the best episodes, like right there alongside of another episode of that series with Vincent D'Onofrio, who gets caught
subway
in a subway train. Yeah, but this is an episode where Robin Williams plays a father who is visiting Baltimore with his family, and his wife gets shot. And it causes what they called in the show, or what they call in the business, or in the police business, a red ball, like sort of an emergency situation that happens, and a major press opportunity and so forth. And it's also, interestingly enough, just as an aside, one of the kids that's there is played by Jake Gyllenhaal. That is an immensely affecting performance by him, which I mean actually kind of did reduce me to tears while I was watching it, and I think that it's worth searching that out. And one final one, another movie that kind of got raked over the coals a little bit. It did end up winning an Oscar for special effects, which was What Dreams May Come, which had Robin Williams' character basically dying in the first scene and going to heaven, and then finding out that his wife, played by Annabella Sciorra, ends up committing suicide and ends up going to hell. And he has to spend the movie trying to reconcile the fact that he's in heaven without his true love, and trying to figure out a way to get her into heaven with him. And that is a movie that, not a lot of people really responded to correctly. I don't know what it was that was standing in the way of people loving this movie, but I mean, visually
it's a good movie,
obviously brilliant. But emotionally, it really got to me, and I really felt like, again, another film that he was really able to tap into dramatic core in a different way, with almost no trace of his comedy. Now, I mean, we keep on saying this kind of thing, and of course we love his comedies and stuff. I mean, some of them we don't love, but some of them we do. I mean, Jason and I were talking about Mrs. Doubtfire, and we agreed that even though Mrs. Doubtfire is not a movie necessarily for us, it is a movie that brought joy to a great many people. And that's nothing to that, you know.
That's a good movie. It's a fine movie. I mean, it's a comedy, but I mean, you know, but that would become his like bread and butter that he could do with it, you know, his eyes closed and everything.
Well, Jerry, somebody actually mentioned to you the Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
That's another one. That's Gilliam. That's Gilliam, and he really performed magnificent. I mean, I would put, Baron Munchausen was definitely. I mean, everyone's in that, but I mean, his performance is very good. But I have to put his performance in The Fisher King as just otherworldly. It's just such an otherworldly. It's a magnificent, hopeful.
Well, you know what's striking?
Movie.
What's striking to me about him. This is also what's incredibly sad about his passing today. Is that hearing stories about when Christopher Reeve first had his accident. Robin Williams would come to his hospital bed and cheer him up to make him laugh. And Christopher Reeve always said he was essential in getting his spirits up and bringing him back to life. When Steven Spielberg was shooting Schindler's List, he'd call Robin Williams and say, I need to laugh. And Robin Williams would spend like an hour doing stand-up on the phone with him to cheer him up. And then you think, you know, Robin Williams, 63 years old, which is still too young, but obviously a man that suffered from clinical depression that has hounded him his entire life. And to get to a point where you're 63 years old and to still feel like it's hopeless is terrible. And
depression.
And,
let me just tell you. Can I just tell you? I suffer from depression. I deal with it every day. I fight it every day. It's a fucking bitch. It's a fucking bitch, and you think you might have it beat. You know, I think I have it beat sometimes when things are going really, really good, and you never know. The next day, you just get up, and that blackness is just over you. You can't even fucking get out of bed, dude.
That's why
I ask you a question, Dean? May I ask you a question, Dean? As a fellow sufferer, does it get better towards the? I notice, especially like a day like today, where I wake up in a black mood. It gets better as the day progresses, I think, as I go out and
I think
work
it's
or
different
something.
for everyone. I think it's different for everyone. I think some people do better in the morning, and when the nighttime comes, I don't think that I don't think there's a hard and fast rule to it, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. There's no rhyme or reason to it. You can't think that okay, so I'm suffering from also some kind of addiction or whatever. So if I beat the addiction, I'll beat the depression.
It doesn't work like that.
That's not what it is. That's not
Don't
what it
work
is.
like that.
You know what it is? It's really about being with people. And that's really how to get over an addiction too, is to be with people, and I think that's why he kept
the right
going to rehabs. It was to be with people who understood him. I mean, because the world of Hollywood, of course, is filled with people who are controlled by addictions and are not doing a goddamn thing about them.
And they're enablers.
Well, this was my point in bringing in the clinical depression, is that a lot of people say, well, he had everything. I mean, who was more beloved than Robin Williams and all this? But this just goes to show that everyone has their own pain, and it's looking from the inside is much different from looking from the outside in. I mean, it's a completely different perspective.
I agree.
That changed in some of the performances of his last few years. People have not talked about these last 5-6 years of work. They've all been kind of, just roundly dismissed. But if you look at stuff, one of my favorite performances that he's done the last few, it was like from 2006. There's a little movie called The Night Listener.
That's a good movie.
With Toni Collette, and it had kind of this King of Marvin Gardens kind of vibe to it. And he really, I'm sure that role spoke a lot to him, probably more so than we even knew when, if you saw the movie, than you even knew at the time. There's that. Yeah. And then, of course, something like World's Greatest Dad, the Bobcat film, and Bobcat Goldthwait was like with one of his best friends. I'm sure he understood the kind of actor Robin Williams could be. And World's Greatest Dad, it's a film not many people have seen, but that's also another, those who have seen it, they're kind of blown away with the quality of Robin Williams' performance.
Mm-hmm. And he had just started doing stage too. I mean, he just did. He recently did Waiting for Godot with Steve Martin on stage, which that was
years ago, right?
That would have been
when was that?
Yeah, that was a few years ago.
That was like in the mid-2000s or something.
But that would have been a ticket, man, to go see that. Yeah. But I want to tell you guys that Jeff Bridges just. He's at the premiere of his new movie, The Giver, and he walked up on stage and he talked about the difficult time it is losing a dear friend, Robin Williams, such a brilliant human being. My heart goes out to his family. And then, of course, everybody's commenting on Twitter. Henry Winkler, who gave one of his first breaks on Happy Days. Robin Williams was like no other. To watch him create on the spot was a privilege to behold. And by all accounts, everyone says that he was an incredibly sweet guy. He was a favorite of Letterman, so I'm sure. I mean, Letterman already taped by the time it was announced that Robin Williams had died, so I'm sure tomorrow night there'll be a tribute to him on Letterman. Steve Martin said, "I could not be more stunned by the loss of Robin Williams, a mensch, a great talent, acting partner, and a genuine soul." So before we close tonight, pick two movies that you guys would choose to show kind of the range or the different sides of Robin Williams. Which two would they be for you guys?
Well, I'll go first. I mean, definitely World According to Garth. I mean, for me, that I think that is like sometimes artists just really just hit it out of the park. Like for me, like just right out of the gate. And I just think that's one of those. This is one of those instances, and I don't know how. I don't know what in the popular consciousness, like where World According to Garth is. I think it should be higher up there. Of course, it's based on John Irving's book, and it was considered kind of an unfilmable, manageable book. But as done in the film, I mean, it's really just you get the arc of an entire life, and there's just a complete richness to it, and frankly, playing that bit from the end of the movie at the start of the show actually made me tear up quite a bit. So, but
me too.
Tarantara. But I guess I would have to agree also with Awakenings. I love Good Will Hunting. That's a great performance, supporting performance. It's wonderful, and all the villainous roles, of course, that Aaron mentioned as well. But there's something about that Awakenings performance. I mean, even it's Robert De Niro, strangely enough, that got the Oscar nomination out of it, but it was really Robin Williams. It's the bigger role. It's the role with change in it, and there's just something about that performance. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, that guy that's just that's the guy that's the doctor, but who's really the one that's crippled inside. And that's something that could be a cliche, and it's something that he actually brings it brings into like a manageable reality. And let me just say one last thing. One last thing I'm going to mention, and this is almost eerie, all right, but he did an episode just recently with Louis C.K. on Louis C.K.'s show in 2012, where he and Louis meet at a graveyard. They're both attending, funerals, and they run into each other at a graveyard. I don't think that Robin Williams is playing himself. He's playing a character, although the character is named Robin. So I can't even remember.
Might be.
He might be. I'm not really quite sure of that. It's kind of left up in the air. But that particular, I mean, Robin Williams has some movies in the pipeline. He was down in Atlanta filming one of his last movies that's not out yet, called Merry Friggin' Christmas. But I'm thinking that, if you're a Louis C.K. fan, or whatever, whether you're not or you are, or whether if you're a Robin Williams fan, you might want to check out that episode, because that might be an interesting epitaph to this career.
Yeah. Well, for me, if you want to see an unhinged Robin Williams performance, if anyone out there hasn't seen Good Morning Vietnam, or particularly Aladdin, I would actually, to see the range of the man, I would choose Aladdin and Awakenings, the two movies that start with A. I mean, to get the full appreciation of all the man was capable of. I mean, those two are tops for me. Aaron, what about you?
I'm going to go for the comic range. I'm going to go for Popeye, his first film. It truly is a remarkable movie debut. It's a live-action cartoon. He looks like a live-action cartoon.
That's true.
It's an amazing performance. I agree. I had a critic friend who was a critic at the time, 1980, and he said, that the second best performance in 1980 after Robert De Niro in Raging Bull was Robin Williams in Popeye. And,
wow.
And it's true. It's an amazing feat of
He does
acting.
embody the character. I mean, he does embody the character for sure. It's physicality,
it's an amazing
singing.
It's an amazing performance. It's fully developed. It comes off the boat, and it's fully enveloped. It's a fully developed comic invention. Whatever problems people may have with the film, I love the film. I think it's a terrific film. But the problems are not, whatever problems we may have with the film, the problems are not with Robin Williams' performance.
I agree.
Or Ray Walston's performance as Pappy.
Actually, I agree with you that there are really no problems with that movie. That's a wonderful, Altman movie. It's still in that Altman world. It's unmistakably Altman, but you're right.
And how fortunate was he to start
if you look at all
film
those
career with Altman,
especially Williams and Shelley Duvall. I mean, who else could play those characters?
She's picture perfect in that.
Yes.
Their scenes together are lovely. The way with the squint and the pipe, it's just terrific. The boxing match number sequence.
Yeah.
What was your other one though, Aaron?
Yeah, what's the other one, Aaron?
For the dramatic portion, I'm gonna go a little left of field. Although, like I said, I did mention Night Listener. That is a terrific one. But I'm gonna go with Insomnia, because it's funny. As much as everyone loves Christopher Nolan, Batman, all the Batman movies, and Memento, and Inception,
they always
and so
forget
forth.
that one.
No one really talks about Insomnia. And as good as Al is in the movie, and I'm sure Jamie will back me up on being a good Al performance, the best scenes in the movie are the couple of scenes are between Al and Robin Williams, because it's two actors from two different temperaments of acting school.
Right.
They have two totally different styles. They have two totally different approaches to the characters and to what the scenes are, and they match up perfectly, and they keep the balance of the scene, and it doesn't teeter into one way or the other, and it's kind of remarkable to see those two unlikely actors put together. And it goes to show you that Robin Williams could go toe to toe with the serious, quote unquote, serious actors, as opposed to compare those couple of scenes to the couple of scenes he had with Dustin Hoffman and Hook, where the balance is all off. But Pacino and
Hook's another story.
When you mentioned Hook, by the way, it just reminds me that I just wish that Robin Williams would have been a little bit more a little bit more judicious in the roles that he took. I mean, like, I don't know how much money he really needed.
I don't blame him. I don't blame him for Hook, actually, because who wouldn't jump at the chance of playing Peter Pan
like
with Spielberg?
Patch Adams.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I know. I mean, Hook. Anybody would work with Spielberg, but like but Patch Adams and Bicentennial Man and things like RV and stuff like that. I just wish that he could have waited for roles, but I guess he was a working actor, and if he was waiting around, that depression might have killed him a lot earlier.
It's not like he was John Huston or Henry Fonda, and they went to Italy to make Tentacles. I mean, let's there's Shelley Winters for that matter.
What a good analogy. So Jerry,
what were your favorites, Jerry?
Finally,
I would, I have, Garf is excellent. Awakenings, Jamie, kudos for you for bringing that up. And Aaron, and The Night Listener is a beautiful movie, very beautiful film. That he did that the same year that he did Man of the Year. Do you remember that? Does anybody remember that movie?
Yeah.
Man of the Year, like comedy, he was like a Jon Stewart-like character, who runs for president. It has its moments. It has its moments, but it never, it never goes, quite where you want it to go, being it's Robin Williams. It's two movies I picked, though. The Fisher King. Mm-hmm. I have to put that in there. The other one that I really have a soft spot for, comedy-wise, is The Best of Times with Kurt Russell.
Oh, interesting.
I like that movie. I laughed my ass off whenever I watched that movie. I thought it was so, we watched it in high school, I guess it came out. I love that movie, where he gets the second chance at the football game and everything, and it's just, and Kurt Russell is very funny in it too. They worked all great together.
Ron Shelton's screenplay, did he direct it, or did
I'd have to look it up, Aaron. I don't know off the top of my head.
He did not direct it. Jack Dundee directed it.
Jack Dundee.
Yeah, that was his character. That was his character name. Hang on, that was his character name. That wasn't his.
Yeah,
I'll tell you who directed it. Roger Spottiswoode directed
it. Spottiswoode directed it. Ron Shelton wrote it. And it was Robin Williams and Kurt Russell. Pamela Lee, terrific as the wife. And it's a little manic, but it's a good. Ron Shelton has a good feel for that small town, missed opportunity vibe going on in the film.
And I mean, the pressure on somebody in that situation, in a town that worships football, the pressure on somebody who has had been in that situation of losing a big game must have